My sister-in-law, Nancy, booked the beach photographer using my name. My nieces, Clara and Elise, cropped me out of every family photo. My cousins Amanda and Jackson split the rental behind my back after I paid the deposit. I was the semi-retired aunt they used for discounts, then deleted from the memories. But I held the contract, the copyright, and every receipt with their names on it. So I sent the truth, unaltered, to a national magazine before they could print a single frame. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The angles were perfect, the lighting flawless, the silence louder than all of it. Meredith paused at the third swipe of the carousel, thumb hovering mid-air. Her breath caught, not because the photo was beautiful, but because something was missing. Or rather, someone. Her. The family stood smiling on a sunlit deck, all wind-tossed hair and tanned legs, coordinated in pastel linen. Her brother's arm wrapped around Nancy's waist, the cousins clustered like a Pinterest ad, and where Meredith had stood, between her nephew and his girlfriend, was a sun flare, strategically placed, subtly widened, just enough to erase her. She frowned and scrolled again. Another beach shot, another coordinated pose, another perfect composition. No Meredith. She recognized the moment. It had been just after brunch. She'd passed out mimosas and asked if they wanted the big group photo before it got too bright. She'd even offered to move the chairs to catch better light. And now, in the polished, gleaming version of the trip preserved online, she was airbrushed into vapor. Her eyes narrowed. She went back to the caption. Best week ever with the core crew. She zoomed in on the background. There, behind Nancy's shoulder, just barely out of focus, was the sleeve of Meredith's cardigan, cropped, blurred, like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong memory. She set the phone down and pressed her fingertips to her temples. It wasn't just that she wasn't tagged, it was that she wasn't meant to be. She didn't belong to the core crew, not according to Nancy, who'd been cheerfully snide for 15 years, but always under the guise of just teasing. She stood and walked to the desk by the window, pulled open the drawer, and took out a worn manila folder labeled Vacation, NC. Inside were the printed booking receipts for the beach house. Her signature was there on the deposit slip. She'd paid it herself, $2,000 up front because the Airbnb host required it all in advance. Nancy had called it a favor. Her cousin Elise had Venmo'd her some of her share weeks later, calling it partial for now. Meredith flipped through her phone again until she found it, one of the few photos she had taken during the trip, a wide-angle selfie, all of them on the boardwalk, sunburned, holding ice cream. Nancy was mid-laugh. Elise was in sunglasses. Meredith was dead center, smile soft, eyes a little squinted from the glare. No one else had posted this photo, not even her niece Clara, who'd begged for copies during the trip. Her thumbs moved slower now, deliberate. She opened her messages and pulled up Clara's thread. She kept her tone light like nothing had stung. Hey love, hope you're well. Do you happen to have any of the unedited group shots from the beach? I'd love to frame one. XO. She hit send, watched the blue message bubble deliver. The 3 dots never appeared, the read receipt did, and then, nothing. She exhaled slowly, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself the last of the afternoon coffee, now gone lukewarm. She took one sip, set the mug down, and reached for her laptop. New email. Subject, final photography invoice balance, $3,200. Unpaid. She stared at the number, then clicked the attachment. There it was, itemized services from Coastal Keepsakes Photography. Session, full-day premium package. Event, family celebration. Contact, Nancy Halpern. Billing email, hers. Meredith blinked. She hadn't signed a thing. She hadn't booked anyone. And yet, there it was. Her email address listed under the invoice header, and her name. A chill crept through her chest. They hadn't just cropped her from the pictures. They'd used her to get them. Meredith closed the tab and whispered aloud, "Did they use my name to book this?" They didn't forget me. They removed me with intention. It was a simple realization, but it settled inside Meredith like a cold stone at the bottom of her stomach. Forgetfulness is passive. But this was strategy. And strategy always leaves fingerprints. The morning after she received the invoice, Meredith sat down at her kitchen table with a mug of tea that had already gone lukewarm. Her laptop was open in front of her, the light from the screen casting a faint glow across the wood. She still had the invoice tab open, $3,200 due, balance unpaid. But now her focus had shifted. She copied the photographer's business name from the header and opened a new browser tab. Within moments, a bright, curated site appeared. Coastal Keepsakes Photography, complete with cursive logos, pastel colors, and a welcome message inviting visitors to turn memories into art. She clicked the Clients tab and found a login screen for private galleries. Below that, a handful of recent sessions were visible. She recognized the location in the background of one thumbnail immediately, the beach house deck with white railing and turquoise Adirondack chairs. The gallery title read, Halpern Family, OBX Week. Meredith clicked. A series of proof images loaded slowly, large, watermarked, and untouched. Each photo had a translucent CKP logo scrawled diagonally across the frame, and beneath them was a message in delicate serif font. Final images available upon full balance payment. For viewing only. She stared, breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. Because in every single photo, she was there. There she was, standing at the end of the dock in a sundress, wind tugging at her silver hair. In another, she sat cross-legged on a striped towel during the beach picnic, laughing mid-sentence as someone passed her a drink. She scrolled further, group photos, wide shots, candid brunch images, and she was present in all of them. No cropping, no edits, no exclusions. She leaned closer to the screen, her brows pulling together as she opened Instagram on her phone and pulled up the carousel post from Nancy's account again. The angles were identical, the framing familiar, but Meredith was missing, cropped out with surgical precision. She flipped back and forth between the unedited proofs and the curated versions posted online, noticing how consistently she had been erased. Her image softened into the periphery or removed entirely. What struck her wasn't the absence itself. It was how consistent it was, how carefully applied across accounts. She checked Clara's feed next, then Elise's, then her cousin's wife, Amanda. Each of them had posted pictures from the trip, carefully framed and edited. The colors were softened, the backgrounds slightly blurred, and in every version, Meredith had been removed. In one photo she remembered clearly, they had all stood in a semicircle on the sand, holding cones of melting ice cream. Clara had insisted they take it before the sun dipped too low. Meredith had stood between Elise and Nancy, smiling, hand on her hip. But now, in the version posted on Clara's feed, only 5 people stood on that beach. The caption read, Us 5 Taxure Core Memories. Her thumb hovered over the image. There had been 6. She set her phone down and leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes close for a long moment. Memory, it seemed, was no longer about what actually happened. It was about what you could edit, filter, and crop to fit a more convenient story. She remembered now how often they had asked her to move, not rudely, just gently. A little to the left, Meredith. Scoot back just a hair? Can you move behind the bench? The light's hitting weird. At the time, she hadn't questioned it. She thought they were just being particular about the shots. Everyone wanted a good photo, after all. She had smiled and adjusted and let herself be moved like furniture. Now, it felt different. Her laptop pinged with a new notification. An email had arrived. The subject line made her pulse tick upward. Photo contract details. With steady hands, she opened a new message draft addressed to the photographer and began typing. Hi there, I noticed my name on the invoice you sent. Could I ask, who exactly signed the original contract? She hit send and waited. A reply appeared within minutes. I'd be happy to clarify. Your name is listed as the client. They erased me from memories I helped finance. The irony struck her so sharply, she let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Not only had they cropped her from the final photos, smoothed her out of moments she had lived, but now, it seemed, they had used her to afford those same memories. Meredith sat in her home office, the mid-morning sun filtering through half-closed blinds, stripes of light falling across the carpet. Her laptop was still open to the reply from the photographer, and she reread the message, slower this time, letting each sentence land with its full weight. "Hi, Meredith. Happy to clarify. Nancy Halpern completed the booking form, but she used your name and email in the client section. Also, the 15% discount was applied using a referral code tied to your account. Let me know if you have further questions." Referral code. Meredith leaned back in her chair and exhaled through her nose, quiet but deliberate. She remembered it now. A conversation over wine at her house back in March, when Nancy asked about the photographer she'd used for her own retirement party the year before. "You said that woman in North Carolina was fantastic," Nancy had said, swirling her Pinot. "Send me her info, would you?" Meredith had been happy to share. She remembered forwarding the photographer's details that night with a short, cheerful message. "Tell her I sent you. She gives 15% off for referrals." She hadn't given it another thought. But now, as the details began to arrange themselves in her mind like puzzle pieces turning face up, a clearer picture began to form. Meredith stood, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder marked Beach House, OBX. Inside, beneath the vacation rental paperwork, was a printed email chain, one of the early ones. There, at the bottom, was the forwarded message to Nancy, complete with the photographer's original rate sheet and the line about the referral discount. She turned it over, hoping for something else, any sign that she'd been consulted beyond that point. But there was nothing. No confirmation, no update, no copy of a final contract. Just silence, like she'd served her purpose and was no longer needed. Her gaze drifted to her phone on the desk. She picked it up and opened her banking app, scrolling back through her transactions from the past 3 months. Nothing related to the photographer appeared. No charges, no deposits, not even a temporary hold. She switched apps and called her credit card company. The hold music played softly in her ear as she sat motionless, her thumb tapping lightly against the desk surface. Finally, a representative answered. Meredith explained she was trying to verify whether a specific merchant had ever billed her card. She gave the business name, approximate dates, and a possible amount. After a few moments of quiet clicking on the other end, the woman replied, "I don't see any charges from that vendor on your account, ma'am. Nothing pending, nothing declined." "Thank you," Meredith said, her voice crisp. She hung up and sat still for a long moment, the silence in the room amplifying the sound of her pulse in her ears. Her name had been used for the contract. Her email was on the invoice. Her referral code had been applied for a discount. But the payment? That had been no one's responsibility, not really, because they had never intended to pay. Or worse, they had assumed she would. Her inbox pinged. New message from CK Photography. Subject: Payment follow-up. Body: Meredith. I've sent 3 invoices now and haven't received payment or confirmation from anyone. Since your name is listed as the primary client, I wanted to check. Are you planning to settle the balance? I'm happy to resend details. Caroline Meredith stared at the screen, a strange calm settling over her. They had used her name, her credit, her kindness, and her silence, but they hadn't counted on her paying attention. And they certainly hadn't expected her to start asking questions. She moved the email into a new folder she quickly labeled Evidence. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she opened a reply draft, then paused, a new idea beginning to take shape. Their silence wasn't random. It was rehearsed. It wasn't the kind of omission that happens by accident. It was practiced, smoothed, repackaged as harmlessness, so subtle, so casual, that if you pointed it out, you became the difficult one. Meredith knew the playbook. She just hadn't expected her own family to be reading from it. She hadn't replied to the photographer's email yet. Instead, she scrolled back through her messages and tapped her niece Clara's name. A new thread, a new approach. This time, she didn't bring up invoices or contracts or cropping, just something light, disarming. "Hey, love. Any chance you still have the group photos from the beach house? I'd love to put one up in the hallway. Such a sweet trip." She added a smiley face for good measure and hit send. 15 minutes passed, then her phone buzzed. An audio message. Meredith tapped it and raised the speaker to her ear. Clara's voice filled the room, hesitantly cheerful. "Hey, yeah, so I think most of the photos went up already. I mean, we weren't trying to be mean or anything, it was just, not everything needs to be shared, it was kind of a vibe thing." Meredith stared at the phone in her hand. A vibe thing. She played the message again, slower this time. "We weren't trying to be mean. Not everything needs to be shared. A vibe thing." She exhaled, tight and low, then forwarded the voice note to Zoe with a one-line message. "You've got to hear this." Zoe responded 6 minutes later, no pleasantries. "That's exclusion with a receipt. Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. That message would fold in a deposition. Don't delete it." Meredith knew Zoe's tone, measured, direct. After 20 years in courtrooms, she didn't deal in maybes. Still sitting at her desk, Meredith opened Venmo and pulled up her past transactions. She searched the word beach and then OBX. Nothing came up from her end, just a few older payments from other trips. Then she searched the names of her cousins and nieces. Indivi, Ijulie. That's when she saw it. Nancy had sent $600 to Clara, labeled House Split. Elise had sent $500 to Amanda, captioned OBX rental share. Even one of the younger cousins whose parents hadn't come had chipped in. All of them had paid each other for a house Meredith had already fronted the deposit for. She checked her own transaction history again. There was no payment to her, no request, no even split reimbursement. They had restructured the bill in her absence and redistributed the rent without her name ever appearing in the ledger. She took a screenshot of each transaction, created a folder, dropped them in, and then something prickled. She returned to the rental agreement in her beach house folder. The property address was listed in the fine print, a 5-bedroom cottage just blocks from the coast. But beneath it, in the footer, something caught her attention. Managed by Sandline Stays, LLC. That name didn't match the host she had originally spoken to. She opened a new tab and searched the LLC's name in the Public Business Registry. The page loaded slowly, as if drawing out the moment. Owner, Amanda T. Clark. Primary contact, amanda@sandlinestays.com. Registered agent, Elise M. Halpern. Meredith stared at the screen. Elise was Nancy's daughter. Amanda was her cousin-in-law. The vacation home hadn't just been rented, it had been hosted. By them. Her deposit had secured income for their business. The cropping, the silence, the odd insistence that not everything needs to be shared. It all suddenly reeked of something else. This wasn't just a vibe, this was profit. She opened her notes app and typed a single line, used for promo, income split, excluded from invoice and photos. She didn't feel hurt anymore. She felt awake. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed in one last query. Can a photography contract be paused due to client dispute? They used my identity to lower the cost, then cropped me out like clutter. The irony wasn't just sharp, it was surgical. Meredith didn't mind being behind the scenes, didn't need to be the center of attention. But there was a difference between being quiet and being erased. And now she knew. They hadn't just removed her from photos. They'd cashed in on her silence. She stood in her kitchen, cordless phone to her ear, the line crackling faintly as Zoe's voice came through from the other end. "Did you read it carefully?" Zoe asked, no preamble. Her voice was clipped, like she'd already made her judgment and was just waiting for confirmation. "I did," Meredith said, her eyes flicking back to her screen. "I'm listed under the client name, the header, the discount code is mine, the email's mine. Nancy booked it under my identity. The photographer thinks I'm the client of record." Zoe exhaled. "Then she has a problem, because that gives you legal standing. You didn't authorize use of those images and you didn't authorize selective editing that impacts your likeness." Meredith's fingers drummed lightly on the countertop. "You think that matters? In court? Maybe. In business? Absolutely. No licensed artist wants to wade into a copyright dispute, especially if there's money on the line." The silence stretched for a moment, not cold, just heavy with understanding. Zoe added, more softly this time, "You said they used your referral code?" "Yes." "Then the discount is traceable to you. Their savings are on your back. It's leverage." Meredith's tea had long gone cold, but she took a sip anyway. She didn't feel angry in the traditional sense. She felt procedural, activated, like something old and rusted inside her had clicked back into motion. After the call, she sat at her laptop and pulled up the photographer's site once again. Her name was still in the portal, still associated with the unpaid invoice. She composed a message in Word first, letting the words take their shape before copying them into an email. To whom it may concern, this message serves as a formal notice that I, Meredith Thompson, am listed as the client of record on your invoice dated, insert date, associated with the Halpern family session. I am not the party who initiated final terms, nor approved edits that selectively removed my image while using my referral and contact information. Given that the payment is still outstanding, I am requesting that you delay the release of any licensed or edited images until financial obligations are fully satisfied. As the named client in your system, I reserve the right to pause final delivery until this is resolved. Thank you for your understanding. Please confirm receipt of this request. Meredith Thompson. She read it twice, then sent it. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a new message. From Caroline, Coastal Keepsakes Photography. "Meredith, thank you for your message. I had no idea there was a payment issue tied to multiple parties. I was preparing to release the digital downloads this weekend. I've paused that process immediately, until I can review everything. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention." Caroline Meredith exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. 48 hours. That's all that stood between them and final delivery. She had paused it with a single, precise intervention. A line had been drawn, and she wasn't behind it this time. She opened her family's group text thread, the same one that had been active throughout the vacation. The last few messages were all photos and heart emojis. No mention of payment, no mention of her. She clicked into the text box. "Hi everyone, small heads up, you may want to check your inbox before printing anything from the trip." No anger, no explanation, just warning. Within minutes, she saw the 3 dots blinking from Nancy's number. Then it stopped, then another set of dots, then nothing. Meredith set her phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was overcast, the color of soft concrete. She watched the wind move through the trees, slow and patient, bending but never breaking. They had used her to bargain, to book, to beautify their memories, and then cut her out as if she were background noise. But they'd forgotten the one truth no amount of filters could hide. The person who signs the contract owns the frame. Across town, Nancy refreshed her email and saw a notification titled, "Image release paused. Pending client confirmation." They wanted beach vibes. I sent a terms of service freeze. The photo album they'd been waiting for, the polished gallery of sunlit poses and curated memories, was now locked behind a firewall of invoices, signatures, and one woman's patience running out. Meredith didn't hear about the group chat explosion right away. What she heard first was the silence. By Thursday morning, there were no new vacation posts on social media, no tags, no stories from Clara or Elise. The hashtags that had flooded her feed, OBX Crew, Shar Salt and Soul, Core Memories, had vanished overnight. That's when she knew the photographer had followed through. Her confirmation came at 9:27 a.m., tucked into an email reply from Caroline. "Hi Meredith, thank you for your message. As requested, I've paused all access to the client gallery. Due to the conflicting payment information and lack of cleared funds, I've cited non-payment as the reason. No digital files will be released until we receive full resolution." Caroline Meredith read the email twice, then leaned back in her chair, a slow breath expanding her lungs. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt exact. This wasn't about revenge, it was about correction. Boundary setting in high definition. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. Messages were pouring into the family thread now. She tapped to open the preview. Elise. "Wait, why is the gallery link not working?" Amanda. "Is anyone else locked out?" I was going to download the sunset pics. Clara. It says access denied due to client status. What does that even mean? Elise. Did someone do this? Meredith watched the thread grow like a fire someone had tried to contain with sugar. Screenshots were flying. The questions were short, nervous, all underpinned by one quiet, frantic truth. They didn't understand what had gone wrong because they'd never expected consequences. Then came Nancy's reply. Nancy. Everyone calm down. I'll just pay the rest this weekend. Don't freak out. Meredith stared at those words for a long time. I'll just pay the rest. As if this were a casual lunch bill, as if this entire mess hadn't been made possible by borrowed identity, ignored invoices, and a carefully calibrated exclusion. She opened a new email to the photographer. Subject, updated payment split proposal. Hi Caroline. Given that the gallery is on hold and the listed client, me, never approved final edits, I'd like to propose a revised payment breakdown reflecting who benefited and who is responsible for services rendered. Enclosed is a line item summary, 15% discount used via my referral code, $2,000 deposit fronted by me for Beach House required for booking. Booking of photography initiated using my name and email. I've included screenshots of Venmo transfers and messages confirming group coordination that excluded me from financial conversation and photo selection. My role, despite being erased visually, was foundational logistically. I'm happy to release my signature on the contract once all parties pay their equal share, including a portion of the deposit and discount recovery. Thank you, Meredith Thompson. She hit send. Her inbox stayed quiet for 20 minutes, and then Caroline replied, Meredith, thank you for this. I hadn't seen this side of things. Unless the group settles the balance in full by Friday at 5 p.m., I'll maintain the hold. No partial payments, no early file access. I'll follow your lead as the named client. Best, Caroline Meredith sat with the message, then scrolled back to the family chat. It had gone quiet again. No more outrage, no more gifs or panic, just silence. Like a dinner party where someone had said too much and no one knew how to follow. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The photo album was no longer a digital keepsake, it was evidence. And the longer it stayed locked, the more their silence began to sound like guilt. At 4:17 p.m., Meredith received another email. This one from Nancy's personal account. Can we talk? Off the record. They told the photographer I just didn't fit the palette. It was the kind of sentence you had to read twice, because the first time you assume you're mistaken, that no one would write something so callous and still think they were being polite. Meredith sat at her desk, the late afternoon light angling through the blinds, stripes of shadow crossing the hardwood floor. She clicked open the forwarded email from Caroline and read the line again, slower this time, letting it settle over her like a slow-burning embarrassment. Hi, Caroline. Thanks again for your work on the OBX shoot. Just a quick note for edits. We're hoping for a cleaner look, maybe a softer palette. No harsh shadows or clutter in the background. Then, beneath it, some of the earlier shots have extra elements. Let's try to keep the final set tight and cohesive. 5 people is a good number. Extra elements. 5 people. There had been 6. Her. Meredith stared at the screen, unmoving. She wasn't mentioned by name, but the context left no doubt. She was the shadow they wanted softened, the element they wanted cropped, the clutter ruining their aesthetic. She closed the laptop without shutting it down. The device was still warm. Her tea, half finished, had gone tepid. The scent of lemon and honey curled upward like a ghost of comfort that no longer belonged. Clutter. The word echoed in her head like a drip from a leaky faucet. She stood slowly and walked to the hallway, the one lined with framed photos, birthdays, holidays, cookouts. Most were black and white prints she'd edited herself, carefully adjusted for contrast and clarity. She'd always been the one behind the lens, the organizer, the one who printed, framed, mailed holiday cards, who made sure everyone got a copy, who remembered anniversaries no one else did. And still, they had called her clutter. A memory surfaced then, one she hadn't thought of in years. Nancy, at Clara's baby shower, standing beside the mimosa bar, turning to a guest with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Meredith's just very detail-oriented. She likes things a certain way, makes her feel helpful. The woman had nodded, vaguely, not knowing what to say. Meredith had smiled too, but her face had stiffened in that moment. She'd felt it, that dismissive tone wrapped in civility. The way people use sugar to cover the taste of something sour. She hadn't pushed back then. Not at the baby shower, not when she was already surrounded by carefully curated compliments. Now, she opened her file drawer and pulled out a manila folder labeled Beach Trip 2023. Inside, she began organizing. Printed screenshots of the Instagram posts, the voice note from Clara about vibes, the forwarded Venmo transactions, the Airbnb LLC listing, the invoice from the photographer, and now the email calling her clutter. She slid each document into a plastic sleeve and tapped them flush. Then she opened her phone and scrolled through contacts until she found Nina, Zoe's daughter, design. A freelancer, graphic design, invoice layouts, social media assets. Meredith dialed. Nina answered after 2 rings, chipper as always. "Hey, Meredith, what's up?" "I need a favor," Meredith said. "It's petty, but also not." Nina laughed. "I'm intrigued. Go on." "I'm sending you an invoice, unpaid but legitimate. Can you format it like a premium statement? Logo, headers, itemization, something you'd get from a wedding vendor or art gallery. I want it clean, professional, print-ready, and in full color." There was a short pause. "You want a designer version of the invoice they're ignoring?" "Yes." "Absolutely, send it over. I'll have it back to you tomorrow. Make sure it includes names, all of them, the itemized list of who owes what." "Oh, we're naming names? This just got interesting." Meredith smiled faintly, the first real one in hours. "It did, didn't it?" As she hung up the phone, she turned back to her hallway of photos, her face in every one of them. No edits, no filters, just presence. They had erased her from pictures. She would reappear in documentation. The next day, Nina's email lands in her inbox. Attached, final invoice branded. "Let me know who's getting the first copy." They sent me edited images. I mailed unedited receipts. No filters, no soft focus, no beach glow pastels, just ink on paper, black and white, itemized and absolute. Meredith stood at the self-service print kiosk in the corner of the office supply store, the rhythmic hum of machines filling the air like a quiet engine of resolve. A few feet away, a teenage employee was restocking envelopes. He didn't glance her way, and she didn't need an audience. She tapped the screen with deliberate calm. Copies, 6 pages per copy, 4 color, full, premium stock. The screen blinked to life and whirred into motion. One by one, the invoices emerged. Each packet began with a simple centered header on crisp ivory paper. Services rendered unpaid balance. Below that, the breakdown, Beach House deposit, fronted by Meredith Thompson. $2,000 referral discount used under her account, 15% contract listed under her legal name, booking and contact management conducted by her. Then came the names. One by one. Clara Halpern, owes $325 Amanda Clark, owes $475 Elise Halpern, owes $550 Nancy Halpern, owes $850, and so on. Beneath each name, she had attached a matching screenshot of Venmo activity. Not doctored, not interpreted, just the digital proof they had split costs and payments around her, strategically, quietly. The final page was the letter, a calm, cold sheet of paper in Meredith's neat serif font, "To whom it may concern." As listed in the attached contract and communications, the services provided during the OBX trip, including lodging, photography coordination, and vendor referrals, were facilitated through my accounts, identity, and personal funds. These unpaid balances reflect the amount each individual benefited from while excluding me financially and visually. This invoice is not about reimbursement, it's about recognition. Meredith Thompson. No threats, no language about lawyers, just clarity. unapologetic and firm. She paperclipped each set and slipped them into labeled manila envelopes, then stacked them neatly at the counter. The woman behind the shipping desk smiled politely. "Do you need tracking on these?" "Yes," Meredith replied. "All of them." By the time she returned home, the air had shifted. Late spring heat hung in the trees, and the mailbox clanked shut behind her with the finality of a drawer being closed. She sat down at her kitchen table, laid out one of the spare copies, and snapped a photo. She attached it in a new email addressed to Caroline, the photographer, with a short note. "Hi Caroline, just confirming these are the parties responsible for the invoice. They've each received a printed, itemized breakdown. Thank you for your patience. Meredith." She hit send and leaned back. The silence in the house felt earned, not empty. An hour later, her phone vibrated against the countertop. Text from Nancy. "Was this really necessary?" Meredith didn't reply. She locked the screen and flipped the phone over. Some questions don't deserve answers. Not anymore. Outside, wind moved through the maple trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and something faintly citrus, like the start of summer, uninvited but inevitable. In a nearby house, one envelope had just landed in a mailbox. The others were en route. No hashtags, no captions, just receipts. The next morning, Caroline forwarded a message from Nancy's work email, subject line, regarding photo gallery access and copyright questions. They tried to celebrate their memories. "I copyrighted the file." It began, as most things in this mess had, with a detail they assumed wouldn't matter. Meredith sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun pooling across the wood in pale orange streaks. The light filtered in through sheer curtains that swayed with a breeze she couldn't feel. Her laptop glowed before her, open to the contract she'd downloaded again from the photographer's site. She didn't need to read it again. She had most of it memorized by now, but a single clause kept tugging at her. Until final payment is received, all images remain under licensing control of the named client and Coastal Keepsakes Photography. Any print, publication, or reproduction requires written consent. Meredith reached slowly for her tea, cold again, and took a sip without really tasting it. The clause had been sitting there all along. What they didn't understand, what they had overlooked in their rush to erase her from glossy memories, was that they had never removed her name from the contract. She was still listed as the client, still the person legally tied to the booking, and that gave her leverage. She opened a new tab and navigated to the U.S. Copyright Office, scanning through the application steps with quiet efficiency. It was simple enough. She submitted proof of her referral code usage, booking confirmation, and contract header listing her name as the primary party. Then she paid the $200 registration fee. 15 minutes later, Meredith Thompson was now the registered co-holder of the commercial use rights for the OBX photo session. It wasn't permanent, but it didn't have to be. The next morning, she woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand. 3 texts in rapid succession from Zoe. "Zoe, did you see Clara's story? They tried to print the album. Blocked at Walgreens, licensing flag." Meredith sat up slowly, blinked twice, and opened Instagram. Sure enough, Clara's story showed a blurry photo of a Walgreens kiosk screen, flashing a copyright warning. "Print service unavailable, usage restricted." Below it was a caption that read, "Why is printing family pics suddenly harder than boarding a plane?" Meredith set the phone down gently. She felt no rush of glee, no electric surge of triumph. What she felt was quieter, deeper, like a correction long overdue. Later that day, similar messages began appearing in the family group chat. Amanda had tried CVS. Elise had attempted an online order through Shutterfly, all blocked. Elise, "Okay, what is going on? Did someone lock the gallery?" Amanda, "Mine got flagged too, says we need a release form." Clara, "Ugh, just wanted one print for my desk." None of them mentioned Meredith by name, but the avoidance was telling, like someone trying to pretend there wasn't a fire while standing in a burning room. By the afternoon, a new post went up on Nancy's Instagram. This one wasn't from the official photographer's gallery. It was taken with someone's phone, poorly lit, oversaturated with warm filters. The cousins sat on a beach towel, their faces turned slightly, captured in motion. Everyone looked mid-laugh. It would have been charming, if not for how purposefully the image avoided clarity. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle not being the center." Meredith stared at the post for a long time. Her face was again nowhere to be seen. But that wasn't the point anymore. This time she wasn't looking to be seen. This time she was watching who else would pretend not to notice. She didn't comment. She didn't screenshot. She simply returned to her desk, opened the gallery dashboard Caroline had shared, and ensured the copyright claim was still active. Then she updated her records with the timestamp of Nancy's post and quietly filed it under a folder labeled Retaliation. That evening, while folding laundry in the soft hum of her living room, Meredith's phone chimed again. This time it wasn't from Zoe or one of the cousins. It was an email forward from Caroline, the photographer. Subject: regarding photo gallery access and copyright questions. The body was short. Nancy had emailed the photographer directly. "Hi, Caroline. Hoping you can clarify. We've had some issues printing. I didn't realize there were usage restrictions. Can you confirm who authorized the copyright block?" Meredith folded the last towel and smoothed it with the flat of her palm. The night outside was calm, the streetlights glowing faintly on the sidewalk. They thought this had been about photos. It had always been about permission. Meredith opened a blank reply draft to Caroline and typed the first line. "That would be me. They silenced me. I gave them something to talk about." Meredith noticed the unfollow before she noticed the uninvitation. It happened on a Wednesday, quietly, like a whisper pulled from the edge of a room. One moment Clara's name was on her feed, beachy posts, bridal countdowns, a flurry of lemon-themed emojis. The next, it was gone. No posts, no updates, no trace. She searched again, just to be sure. Nothing. Not blocked, just gently, deliberately removed. It was the kind of silence that didn't announce itself, the kind that expected you not to notice, but Meredith noticed everything now. Later that same afternoon, a cheerful group text thread pinged on her phone. A cousin's bridal shower itinerary, RSVP requests, dress code, boho blush and white only, and a curated playlist link. Her name wasn't included in the to field. She hadn't even been blind copied. She was simply not there. She sat at the kitchen counter with the unopened mail, her reading glasses pushed to the top of her head, and the soft tick of the wall clock marking time. No one had said anything. No one had explained. They didn't have to. The message was in the omission. They'd pushed her to the edge, and when she didn't fall off, they turned away as if she had. Meredith didn't reply. She didn't confront. She didn't ask why. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small red folder labeled Personal Affairs, Legacy. It was her copy of the estate planning paperwork, simple, clear, last updated 3 years ago after her minor surgery. She flipped to the second page. Listed under non-spousal family beneficiaries were 4 names: Clara, Elise, Amanda, Nancy. She stared at the list, then reached for a pen. In one long, confident stroke, she crossed them out. Not in anger, not as punishment, but because her husband, David, had once said something she remembered with startling clarity, sitting on their porch with iced tea in hand years ago, the sun just beginning to dip behind the trees. Make sure your generosity is appreciated, not expected. At the time, she'd brushed it off with a smile. But now, with his voice ringing in her memory and silence blooming from every digital direction, it felt less like a suggestion and more like a last gift. She replaced the names with 2 friends, Zoe and her goddaughter Lucy. She added one final note at the bottom, written in her own handwriting, soft and neat. Updated after review of family conduct. Generosity is not automatic. It is earned. As she sealed the revised packet and slid it into the fireproof safe, a quiet calm settled over her shoulders. This wasn't spite. It was stewardship. Later that evening, as the sky turned from lavender to slate, she sat by the front window with a throw draped over her legs and a small notebook open on her lap. She had stopped journaling the exact moments they erased her. Those were documented well enough. Now she wrote about what came next. How being pushed out can sometimes bring you home to yourself. The porch light clicked on. The phone buzzed once on the end table. A message. Meredith reached for it, expecting another automated email or a local store promo. But it wasn't. It was a private message on Facebook, from Elise's younger brother, Jackson, the one who had barely spoken during the vacation, the one who had spent most of the trip with headphones on, watching from the edges. Honestly, we didn't know they were doing all that. I thought you were in the album. I'm sorry. Meredith stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The words weren't dramatic, weren't performative. They were just quiet, unfiltered, honest. For the first time in weeks, she let herself feel something warm flicker behind her sternum. Not reconciliation, but recognition. And sometimes, that's where justice begins. She typed slowly in response, then paused, seeing another incoming message from someone unexpected, the bride-to-be herself. They paid for memories with my name. I sent them a refund policy. The email came at 6:12 a.m., before the sun had fully risen, before the world had settled into the noise of another day. Meredith had just poured her first cup of coffee when the notification flashed across her screen. She didn't rush to read it. She let the mug warm her hands, watched steam curl toward the ceiling, and listened to the old wood of the house sigh as it adjusted to the morning chill. When she did sit down, the subject line said everything. Can we talk about the gallery? Nancy. The body was longer than she expected, a strange blend of condescension dressed up as diplomacy. Meredith, I think things have gotten a little out of hand. This whole photography thing, it feels a bit petty now. We've all had our feelings hurt and maybe some wires got crossed, but I don't think blocking access to pictures that mean so much to the family is fair or healthy. Let's just move on and let people print what they want. Life's too short, right? Meredith read the message twice. The passive, things got out of hand. The carefully indirect phrasing, and of course the word she'd been waiting for, petty. She opened a new draft. No delay. No overthinking. Nancy, you used my name, my referral, and my personal accounts to obtain services you never paid for. You directed the photographer to crop me out of the final edits while benefiting from the deposit I fronted and the discount I secured. If you think enforcing legal and financial accountability for that behavior is petty, then we define integrity differently. Meredith. She didn't send it yet. Instead, she pulled up the invoice Nina had helped her design, the polished, color-formatted statement with each cousin's name, balance, and role listed. At the bottom of the document, she added a single line in bold, late payment penalty, 10% administrative fee applied after final notice. Then she attached it to a new email addressed to every party involved in the shoot: Nancy, Clara, Elise, Amanda, and the photographer, Caroline. Subject line, final options, photo gallery access. You now have 2 options regarding the OBX photo gallery, which remains legally locked due to unpaid invoices and confirmed misrepresentation on the original contract. Option 1, settle the original balance of $3,200 plus a 10% administrative fee, $320 within 5 business days. Upon confirmation, I will release licensing rights and remove my copyright claim. Option 2, decline to settle and allow me to file a small claims case in which I will present the photography contract listing me as primary client, screenshots of Venmo transfers excluding me from house rental reimbursements, messages referencing my exclusion from photos, email requesting edits to remove clutter. Either way, the gallery remains locked until I authorize its release. No further discussion will take place unless one of the 2 options is selected in writing. Best, Meredith Thompson. She hit send. Then she sat back and waited. The silence lasted longer this time. No instant protest, no panicked texts, just a slow, collective reckoning unfolding behind screens she couldn't see. Hours passed. Meredith cleaned her kitchen. She called Zoe. She baked a lemon loaf and delivered a slice to her neighbor. By the time she returned home, dusk was beginning to settle. Her inbox held one new message. From Caroline Photographer. Subject, confirmation, legal status update. Hi Meredith, just confirming receipt of your legal notice and revised invoice. I've updated the gallery status on my end to client hold legal dispute pending. No images will be released, printed, or archived until I receive your formal clearance. Appreciate you keeping this professional. Let me know when you're ready to proceed. Caroline Meredith closed her laptop and turned to the window. The sky was streaked with peach and gray, the kind of quiet sunset that didn't need to announce itself. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt organized, heard, a presence restored to the very memories they tried to revise without her. They wanted a vacation album without the inconvenience of accountability. Instead, they got a formal ledger. As she reached for her phone, a new message appeared, this time from Clara. Would you consider splitting it? Just to end all this? They expected me to cave. I expected them to understand interest. The days stretched on, long and oddly weightless, like the quiet that follows a storm no one wants to admit happened. Meredith checked her inbox each morning, expecting something, an apology, a reaction, even a backhanded complaint. But nothing came. Not a word. Not a payment. Not a whisper from the group that once flooded her phone with vacation plans and passive-aggressive emojis. Instead, silence settled like dust on everything. At first it stung. There was a part of her that still felt surprised by how quickly they had retreated, how little they fought for her attention once they couldn't use her anymore. But the surprise passed. And when it did, Meredith realized the silence was less about peace and more about control. They weren't finished. They were waiting for her to drop it, waiting for her to blink. She didn't. Instead, she turned her focus inward, to the one set of photos that no one else had bothered to post, to tag, or to crop. Her own. She pulled out the slim external hard drive from her desk drawer, dusted it off, and connected it to her laptop. Dozens of folders populated the screen, some labeled by date, others by occasion. OBX May 2023, Deck Lunch Group, Brunch Candids. She clicked through them slowly, each photo opening in its full, unfiltered resolution. There she was, smiling in the sunlight beside the beach house, laughing at something Jackson had said on the boardwalk, carrying a tray of mimosas onto the deck, standing, poised, present, woven into the fabric of every memory they had tried to rewrite. She spent the afternoon gently retouching a few of her favorites, not to edit herself in, but to honor the fact that she'd never left. That evening, as the cicadas hummed beyond the windows and the kitchen filled with the scent of rosemary from her garden roast, she opened her private social account, the one her family didn't follow, and created a new album titled Uncropped. She uploaded 24 photos, no captions, no filters, no fanfare, just proof. Proof she existed, proof she paid, proof she smiled, proof she stood still long enough to be cropped and chose to remain. Under the album's description she typed, "For the memories that didn't need editing to matter." She shared the link with only a few people, Zoe, Nina, her book club friends, and 2 neighbors who had checked in with casseroles and concerned glances during the fallout. By the next day, comments began trickling in. "You look radiant. These are gorgeous. Frame the one on the dock. It's crazy they'd even try to cut you out of this." Meredith didn't reply to all of them, but she read every word, slowly, with care. Not because she needed validation, but because she needed reminder that there were people who saw her without needing to be asked. On the 4th evening after she'd posted the album, her phone buzzed while she was rinsing dishes. She wiped her hands on a towel and checked the notification. A direct message request. From Clara's older sister Lillian, the one getting married in September. Meredith hesitated for a moment, then tapped to open it. "Hi, Meredith. I saw the photos you shared. I had no idea they looked that beautiful in the original shots. I'm planning my wedding and I was wondering if you'd be open to sharing your photographer's contact info?" Meredith stared at the message, heart still, lips parting slightly. Not in shock, but in something slower, deeper. Like recognition coming from a direction she hadn't expected. She placed the phone down beside the sink, let the water run, and watched the steam curl upward through the soft kitchen light. The same people who once erased her were now circling back, not with apologies but requests. They hadn't made peace with what they did. They were simply trying to work around the consequences. Meredith picked up the phone and typed her reply, then paused, hovering over the send button, as a new thought struck her. What if the photographer said no? They tried to bury me in beach sand. I buried them in documentation. It was the same photo they'd all been dying to print. The group shot on the final day, standing in the late afternoon sun with the ocean behind them and wind in their hair. They'd taken it right before heading back to pack, still sunburned and full from lunch, still pretending nothing was wrong. It had been a favorite even then. Meredith remembered the moment clearly. Caroline had crouched slightly to get the shot, asking everyone to stand close, hold still, and smile. She had. Even when she saw Nancy's eyes flick over toward her, and Elise subtly shift to the right, tightening the group away from her. What they hadn't counted on was that Caroline had snapped multiple versions of that moment, including the original wide shot, the one before cropping, the one that showed all 6 women, not 5, the one where Meredith stood with her hand in her pocket and her feet dug slightly into the sand, still and certain and utterly unedited. And now it was licensed. She had received the pitch from a journalist Zoe knew through her legal circles, someone writing a long-form piece for an online publication focused on overlooked forms of elder exclusion and financial manipulation within families. The piece would be called Invisible Until Invoiced: How Financial Bait and Switch Shows Up in American Families. The reporter had wanted to highlight real cases, quiet, legally murky injustices that left no bruises but left marks nonetheless. Meredith had said yes. Caroline, the photographer, agreed to license the image under the condition that all faces be blurred and no full names printed. Meredith was listed as M. Thompson. The photo caption read only, "Pictured, a real family vacation where the person who paid the deposit was later cropped out of the final photos." It was subtle, but anyone who had been there would know. They'd recognize the clothes, the stance, the shoreline. The article didn't name them, but it didn't have to. Silence has shape, and this one was unmistakable. Meredith read the finished piece 3 times when it published. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. It felt more like an exhale, long overdue, heavy with everything she'd carried and cataloged. She let herself close the laptop slowly, as if sealing something shut not out of anger, but completion. Later that day, Caroline sent her a short message. "It's out. You handled that with more class than they deserved. I've had 3 other clients forward it to me today, all saying they recognize the dynamic." Meredith typed a brief reply. "Thank you for helping me be visible again, even if just for 1 frame." She didn't post the article herself. She didn't need to. The internet did what it always does. It spread quietly but efficiently through the soft channels of mutual follows and inbox forwards. Meredith didn't need to scream. Her inbox pinged late that evening. Subject, payment sent, partial balance. From Nancy Halpern attached was a screenshot of a PayPal transfer for $800. No message, no context, no apology. Meredith stared at it for a long time. The amount was precise, but incomplete. It didn't touch the admin fees. It didn't acknowledge the photographer's overdue balance. It was just enough to seem like a gesture without offering a real hand. She didn't reply. Instead, she took a blank note card from her drawer and wrote something down in her own handwriting. They paid for the photo, but not the damage. She slipped it into the envelope where she'd stored all the documents, the receipts, the contracts, the gallery lock email, and now, Nancy's payment screenshot. One by one, they formed a paper trail stronger than any family story. Across town, Meredith imagined the cousins seeing the article, skimming it at work or whispering about it in text threads, wondering if anyone else had noticed, realizing it wasn't just a warning. It was a record. The next morning, Meredith receives a new notification. The article has been picked up by a national legal blog. Headline, "When a group photo becomes a legal document." They never said sorry. So I stopped waiting for it. The envelope was thick, off-white, and sealed with a rose gold sticker shaped like a leaf. It arrived 3 weeks too late, postmarked the same day the article hit national circulation. Meredith didn't need to open it to know what it was. The timing spoke louder than any RSVP card could. She sliced it open anyway, using the letter opener her husband had given her their first Christmas together. It glided through the paper with the same clean finality she now carried in her bones. Inside, nestled in blush-pink tissue, was the formal invitation to Clara's bridal shower. The font was swirly, faintly metallic, and hard to read. The words were pretty, polite, impersonal. She noticed what wasn't there. No note. No, "We missed you last time." No acknowledgement of the group thread she'd been excluded from. Just a location, a date, and a request to dress with light garden elegance. Meredith placed the envelope flat on her desk and sat with it for a moment. Her tea had gone cold again. She didn't mind. The bitterness felt appropriate. She could have gone. She could have worn something soft and floral and sat politely through cucumber sandwiches and Prosecco pours, pretending the last 2 months hadn't happened. But forgiveness isn't a costume, and this wasn't a tea party. Instead, she opened her laptop and navigated to her favorite local nonprofit, a legal fund that provided support for women navigating family-based financial abuse. She selected the donation option and typed in an amount. Under Send Notification To, she entered Clara's email address. In the message box, she wrote, "In honor of the bride-to-be, may your next contract be one you read in full." She pressed send and closed her browser. That weekend, her friends, real friends, not relatives who called her clutter, surprised her with a weekend spa trip upstate. Zoe, Nina, her neighbor Danny, and even her old co-worker Elaine carpooled to a cozy cabin near the river where the air smelled like cedar and eucalyptus, and the staff greeted them with warm stones and warmer smiles. There were no hidden meanings, no filtered captions. Just real laughter, unfiltered photos. Meredith smiled in every one, not because someone told her to, but because she wanted to. On the second night, they sat in robes with facials drying on their cheeks, sipping herbal tea and passing around a phone to scroll through the article again. Nina tapped one of the blurred beach images, zoomed in, and tilted her head. "You know," she said, "even with the faces blurred, you can tell which one is you." "Yeah?" Meredith asked, half amused. Nina nodded. "You're the only one who's not performing." They all laughed, but Meredith didn't forget that line. They returned Sunday evening, just as the sun was dipping below the trees, painting the driveway gold as Meredith carried her weekend bag inside. She was tired in the best way, stretched out, reset, lighter. She unpacked slowly, putting each item back in its place. Her robe, her journal, a sample bottle of lavender oil. Then she sat at her desk to check her email, expecting nothing urgent. But there it was. Subject, photo rights update. Access restored from Coastal Keepsakes Photography. Hi Meredith. Now that the financial conflict has been formally resolved and the licensing period has lapsed, I've released the full gallery to your client portal. You can now download any image, full resolution, watermark-free. Let me know if you'd like prints made. I've also uploaded a zip folder of all your originals for safekeeping. Warmly, Caroline Meredith didn't click the link right away. She just sat there, staring at the screen, the cursor blinking beside the word download, like it was waiting for her to reclaim something she had already won. She reached for her mouse, hovered over the link, and saw a second notification pop up. New comment on family financial abuse article from Anonymous. They saw me as a background. I turned out to be the frame. The photo was unremarkable at first glance. No group, no laughter frozen mid-motion, no sun-kissed posing. Just Meredith standing at the edge of the dunes, barefoot in the sand, holding a half-full glass of rosé. Her head was slightly tilted to the right, wind tugging at the hem of her linen shirt. Behind her, the sky glowed in bands of lavender and gold, the tide curling in behind her like punctuation. She remembered the moment clearly. It hadn't been posed. Caroline had called out to her from the boardwalk steps. "Just stay like that," she'd said. Meredith had turned, not smiling, not performing, just present. And now, it was the only photo she printed. She'd had it enlarged to 12 by 18, bordered in soft white matte, then framed in dark walnut. It hung in her hallway now, where the light from the front door touched it gently every morning. Guests always paused there. "That's from the beach trip, isn't it?" Zoe had asked the first time she visited. Meredith nodded. The only shot that didn't need adjusting. She hadn't framed it for vanity. She'd framed it because it was the only moment that hadn't asked her to move aside. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner and a reread of her favorite novel, Meredith returned to her desk and pulled out her journal. She turned to a clean page, smoothing the crease with the side of her hand. She began to write. People think exclusion is silent. It's not. It clicks. It clicks when your name is left off a group text. When your deposit is accepted but your presence is erased. When people talk about memories like they happened without you and you realize they always meant to. It's loud, like a camera shutter right before the cropping begins. She paused for a moment, then wrote one more line. They didn't just crop me out. They trimmed around the truth. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. She ignored it at first, until she saw the subject line flash again across the lock screen. New comment on, family financial abuse isn't always a crime, but it leaves damage. Curious, she opened it. Anonymous comment. I read this 3 times before realizing I've done this to someone. I think I was Elise in a different story. Thank you for writing it anyway. Meredith sat back, fingers resting on the edge of the keyboard. She didn't know who had written it. It might have been a stranger. It might have been one of them. That uncertainty was its own kind of answer. A week later, she attended a family birthday party. Just an appearance, no drama, no. She wore navy blue and silver earrings, her hair pinned back the way her husband always liked. She didn't avoid anyone, but she didn't insert herself either. The cousins were quieter this time, not cold, just careful. They watched where they stood in photos. They double-checked angles. Meredith saw it happen more than once. A slight shuffle before a group shot, a quiet murmur of, "Is everyone in?" The irony wasn't lost on her. She took no photos that day. She didn't need to. Her presence, at last, was enough. When she returned home, the hallway light was still on. The framed photo caught it just right, the glass surface casting back a faint reflection of her walking past. She paused. There she was, still, steady, unblurred, the beach behind her, the sky endless, the glass half full, not forgotten, not erased, just finally in focus. She turned out the light, the last flick of her fingertip echoing softly in the stillness of the house. The frame stayed where it was, untouched, permanent, and in her heart, not resentment, just record-keeping, not bitterness, just the knowledge that she hadn't disappeared. They had tried to reduce her to background, but she had become the border, the constant, the keeper of the receipts. They cropped me out of the memory. I paid the bill that brought it back.